for a lot of us, and I'm very pleased to let Georg take over and speak for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the organizers that it's possible that I'm here and that I can talk to you. I mean, I could make it very short. I love maps, and I think they are relevant. That's the short story of what I'm up for, what I'm interested in. And my main question why I'm on a sabbatical currently. I was a dean on in my university for 6 years, and they decided finally I should have a sabbatical. So I decided on going to places, and one of the places is here because I had some connections with MIT in the past as well, and so on. So I went to Boston, and the main question in my sabbatical, which I would like to follow up, is related to the title of the talk, is what functions do maps have? That is what I'm interested in, and I would be really interested in, I don't know, sharing ideas about that. And the way I'm thinking here, the line of thinking here is that, well, as cartographers, we know how to do maps. And GIS is a very prominent tool that produces a lot of maps, correct? We all know, we're nearly close as pushing buttons and maps are produced. Okay, so that we know how to do it. In map production is something which we know a lot about, so to say. We know a lot also about map use. We know that, yeah, well, we have to do it this way and that way, graphically speaking. The perception plays a role. All those things are known to us. But if the map is any good, we don't know. Very often, we don't know. Very often, we don't know. It can be actually a map which is very ugly designed, can be a good map sometimes, because it transforms information which I need right now to make a decision eventually. So it informs my decision which I need to do right now, eventually. So it seems like we have to go a step further to look into how maps work, so to say. And I really think that it is based on that idea of the function of maps. And there are several ways how you could look into that. And that is what I'm interested in, so to say. And I'm trying to reach out to others which might be interested in that as well, so to say. So just to give you this idea why I'm here. And what I'm doing just briefly, I'll give you an idea about our research, what we are doing. We are interested in web mapping, internet cartography. So we are looking into producing, for instance, something like an atlas. We all know what an atlas is. But in a modern sense, what can be a modern understanding of an atlas? This is something which we have been interested in. So just to give you an idea, there was a project which is called Gender Atlas. There's some screenshots of that atlas. That project is meant to highlight, to visualize indicators about gender-related topics. So obviously, there are indicators which demonstrate that females and males are treated in many ways, in economically speaking, in social speaking, differently, so to say, still, and we can show that in maps. And so what we've done with that is that we, for instance, demonstrated, we told stories about that. How many mayors in our country are female or male? How many street names are male or named after females, and so on, those type of things. And so by telling those stories, the interesting effect was that for whatever reason, members of the Austrian parliament get to know that atlas, learn to know about it, and they looked into it. And then they decided, well, that is actually important because it somehow gives a picture, it tells a story about where we are and what might be needed in our policy making, in our regulations, to overcome what is right there if we want to go into a particular direction. So what the Austrian parliament has done with this atlas is they made a decision in the parliament that is needed. And so what we're doing right now is that we are working with the Austrian government, with the ministries and the chancellor actually, to say that could be part of something. I'm not sure if you've ever heard about this cockpit idea, that we are monitoring what is ongoing. And the monitoring could be meant to a company, but it could be meant to a city, it could be meant to a whole country. So I have like a cockpit in a car or in a plane. I'm having visualizations of the status of what's ongoing. And so the Austrian government says, well, this is important for us. It's like one element of a cockpit showing how are we doing in our country in that relation. And there are other elements which they want to combine to that, so to say. So I thought that is a nice example on, in terms of, well, as I said, my talk is called The Relevance of Cartography. And I think, yes, here we are. It's really relevant right now, here and now. Because sometimes cartography is seen as, well, it's nice to have, it's old-fashioned, we all love maps, but. And so here we are with something which is right there, is used right now for decision-making, for informing decision-making, so to say. So we are actually interested in doing that further, and just to give you an idea about that. Another project which we have been involved in heavily is the Austrian government have decided to say, well, Google Maps is fine, it's a good base map, but we can do better. That was the idea, okay? And so the idea here was that if there is something changing, if there's a new street being built out there, there's a new shopping mall being built there right next door, how long will it take to be included in a base map? And so when we're doing that with the governmental agencies directly, they have a direct workflow between something is ongoing, there's a regulation to that, and it comes directly into the base map. So we have built a base map which overcomes, so to say, the shortcomings of Google Map, and is used basically in Austria for all kind of senses as an open source, common license. Everybody can use it, so to say, base map, and has become really popular in our country. So just to give you an idea, we've won some awards on that. What we also are interested in our research is that we think, in an overall sense, cartography is really meant to communicate information. Okay, a map to me is really something which is an interface between data, okay, all kind of data, technology, information, but then there is a human. Okay, if it's just computers which talking to each other, we don't need maps. Actually, it's too complicated anyhow. But if there's a human involved, we need an interface between the data and the human, so to say. So that is communication at the end of the day. But do I need to go to the computer? Do I need to go to places to get that piece of information which I need? Or can technology help us? And that is obviously the idea of location-based services. So a location-based service would mean the information is right on my fingertip, on my mobile phone, on my device, or whatever devices might be there, technologies might be there. We can think about all kinds of ideas about that. And also the location, so my location or the location of the device plays a role. So it's a variable of that system. So we're interested in that. And obviously a very good scenario to look into that would be wayfinding, navigation services. That has become a popular element. So the idea could be, if you want to find me, that is a map of the city of Vienna. We've built apps like these. So if you want to find my office, want to have a coffee in Vienna with me, how do we do that? Well, it's an engineering thing. So we will look into how can we find your position. We all know GNSS and GPS and those type of things. And even indoor, it's possible to find a position. So ticked off, it's possible to do that. But then we have to model that, okay? We model that. We need to model the route. Which route might be the one which is the one you need? So is it either the shortest one or the one with the least decision points, least decisions to make? Is it the one where it's most crowded or less crowded? There are different routes which humans take. Can we engineer those? That's a question which comes along with this. And then finally, how do we present that information? That's a core cartographic aspect. How do we present that information on a restricted device, on a small display device? And we could say there are those type of questions should be tackled. So we've come up with an overall kind of concept on that. And we looked into all kinds of positioning ideas. We've looked into that modeling ideas. And one of the things which we have developed was, for instance, the idea that I always call it the Amazon idea. You know, Amazon. So when Amazon or when you book a hotel, the same methods apply there. It's called collaborative filtering. So if you go into Amazon and want to buy a book, and you're looking into particular books, then what Amazon is doing is they're storing that information of your interests. They make a profile, and they store that profile, and in the collaborative filtering method, then it is compared. Your profile is compared with other profiles. So they then say, well, others which have been interested in that book are also interested in that book. So they give you recommendations which are more likely than other recommendations based on that profile matching. Okay, so the idea here is, why not having that for spatial information? Okay, so a person which comes to Vienna and goes to that coffee house first, sees the opera house then, goes to that place then, and goes to this place then, has a particular profile, obviously, a particular habit. And then, so we look into other habits and compare those and say, well, most likely that people then will more likely they will want to go into that place. And so we have other recommendations for those people than others, so to say. So we've done that in the zoo, for instance, in Vienna, and it's significant because people with young children have a different pattern than people which have less time or more time or whatever, so to say. So that type of idea is in the modeling aspect, part of that. What you need then is this, what we call context. We need to have information about the context. So a key element of that is context modeling. And context plays a key role for modern cartography. And what I mean by that is, if I understand that still as communication, if I'm on the intersection in front of this building here, okay, and it's raining, the wind is blowing, it's loud, I'm in a hurry, and I'm talking to Wendy. Same information I would say differently than when I'm sitting here with her, relaxed, having a chat. I have maybe the same information. I would say something like, the information I want to get across is, come on, let's have a coffee together. I would say it differently. Why? Because the context is different, correct? We all would agree. I'll say it differently to my small child than to somebody I don't know. Same information, I would need a coffee or something, but I would do it differently. The context is determining how we communicate, basically. And the same is true to mapping, to cartography. That is what we are interested in. How does that determine, or can we adapt the way we speak with maps based on context? So we look into context modeling as one of the key elements of that as well. So what we also do is, based on that context, we say, well, users are different, obviously. And the wayfinding scenario, again, is a very useful scenario to make that clear. When we're looking at wayfinding, our hypothesis was, well, if we all go into a shopping mall, all of us, okay, if I have to have a guiding and navigation system for all of us, giving us the same guiding instructions, it's not really efficient, because, as I said before, with this communication, the context, and also we are different. So our hypothesis was that there is a typology of our behavior. So in that scenario of a shopping mall or a shopping street or a shopping center, our hypothesis was that we test all of us, we will go into that places, but the pattern of our behavior, and we can aggregate those to types, a typology of behavior. Okay, that's what we have done. So, and if you're looking at that, there's a cluster. The first cluster is predominantly male. So people go into that shopping area for a short time, have a high speed, make almost no stops, and if they stop, only very short stops. A significant cluster. And the opposite of that, another significant cluster, predominantly female. They go there for a long time, very slowly, make a lot of stops, and the stops take a long time. And we're running into all kinds of stereotypes about males and females with this. So males go to shopping areas, shopping malls, they rush into something, buy themselves something, and then they're gone. And there are other groups of people which spend a lot of time strolling around, those type of things. So one thing which we've looked into there was, is it true that there is a typology? And we can prove that. But then we run into this stereotype thing about males and females. So we have double cross-checked that in different scenarios and also in different cultures. So we've done it with Hong Kong University as well. And it was kind of, it has proven that there is a typology. So there is a typology, we behave differently, so to say. We do that now with railway stations, for instance, or underground stations. So the way we behave as pedestrians can be aggregated aggregated to a particular type. This is what we have found out with this, so to say. And that plays a role for the location-based service then, because if I would say the same thing to everybody, it's probably not as efficient if we are different, and we need something different, so to say. Huh? So this is why we have done that, and I've looked into that. But then we have been successful in doing that. We've built an app. We can guide you from A to B through Vienna. You will find me. We can have a coffee together successfully. But the way engineers are doing that is that car navigation services. A car navigation service says, well, go 750 meters on that street and then turn northwest into that street or something like this. This is nonsense for humans. That's not how humans communicate about wayfinding instructions or guiding instructions. What we need to do is we need to include a human-like description. So the idea was, can we find semantic descriptions of space which all of us can understand? Instead of saying, it's the first time I'm here in this room, instead of saying to me, a guiding instruction, it's correct what the guiding instruction would do. Go 5 meters in that direction, that would be the correct way to tell me that I should leave that room. Go 2 meters in that direction and so on and so on. So giving me that type of geometry information, I could find a navigation system which says, leave the building. It's the first time I'm in this building, I'm able to do it. If you visit me in my office in Vienna and I give you the guiding instruction, leave the house, you can do it. We call that a semantic description. So can we find such basic semantic descriptions which all of us can understand? You're in front of a park in Vienna, first time ever. There are a lot of small lanes, roads through there. It's fine. I give you the instruction. I just tell you, cross that park. You can be able to do it, okay? So that is what we call a semantic dimension. That's what we've tried to engineer, so to say, and to build. And it's interesting to see that. So for instance, in that old town of Salzburg, for instance, just cross the old town, so to say. That would be fine. You stroll around there. It's okay. You can do it. Cross that bridge. It's fine. Semantic descriptions of space. You can do that not only in urban environments. You can do that in all kinds of environments. We do that with mountaineering, with skiing. In Austria, skiing is a big thing. So skiing needs guiding instructions as well, somehow, and mountaineering. Same thing applies there as well. It works fine, actually. So to describe the environment with semantic descriptions and not with geometry descriptions only, so to say. So we've done that, and then, okay, we said, well, we can do that. We put that on mobile devices, and now I put it on a mobile device, and I found out that we fail again. I call it the keyhole problem. So another problem which occurred here was, let's assume I would give that part of that group here, from Wendy to the person here, I would give you a mobile phone, okay? You come to Vienna, I give you a mobile phone. There's a map on it with all instructions how to find from A to B. That map is on that mobile phone. In order to get to that information, you're not zooming, you're not changing scale, but you're allowed to pan and scroll. It's like a map where you can have a look on it like through a keyhole, but you have to pan and scroll, okay? And then the other group here, you would get the same map, nothing different, the same map, but on a non-restricted device. A big device could be paper, for instance, whatever. It's not, you see the whole map always, while you always see only a part of the map, but the same information is nothing different, okay? Now, the goal is, the aim is, both of you should find B. What will happen? Both groups find it. So if it's only about navigation, it works fine. That's okay. So now I take it away from you. I take the mobile phone away, I take the maps away, okay? So from now on, and then I ask you questions, and from now on, I'm referring to your mental representation of the world, the mental map, which you have built. It's the first time you walk through that area based on the map. You found your way successfully, but you've built a mental map, okay? Now you must refer to it. So I'm asking questions like, okay, so here we are now. Where have we come from? show me in the real world. I mean, you don't have the map now, so you have to act in real space. Where have we come from? So in that group, you, with the mobile phone, same map, same information, it was just one variable different, which is the display size, the format of the displays. Just one variable, there's nothing else. And that group will say, well, I think we've come from this direction. So you will show in the real world, okay? And the average error you will make is about more than 60 degrees. And I will ask the same question to that group, and the average error you will make is significantly less. It's about less than 30 degrees. Just one variable have entitled you to act in space, in real world space, based on your mental representation, significantly better than this group. Also, you have the same map, just because I looked through a keyhole into it, so to say. This is dramatic. And it confirms what we know from car navigation services. You all know that stories, of course. If I turn it off, you lost. So we have that phenomena that car navigation services are used very, very widely. It's a mass market. And so we tend to become very passive in following guiding instructions. So that means that we are not actively building a mental representation of the world. And that means that if I turn it off, I can't refer to a mental map because I haven't built it. I'm lost. I don't know where to go. That's a phenomena here. So what I'm thinking, really what I'm thinking with this is, and I monitored myself while I was in Boston and Cambridge these weeks now. We are basically, with these new technologies, that they are all great, but we are not enabling citizens sometimes. We are not enabling them. We are disabling us, in a way. We are getting more blind, so to say. It's like getting blind, spatially, with this. If I really pinpoint it down, in a way. So I'm really interested in, can we use cartography in a way that we enable us, enable citizens? Sometimes it's fine. I mean, I just have to find A to B. There's no doubt about it. I don't need to be enabled for understanding the overall structure of the environment. It's not needed. But sometimes I think it's really needed that we have like classes so that I can see what is there, what is around me. And this is what a map actually could do, it should do actually. So I'm really interested in that topic as well. So I would like to reach out to people which find that fascinating. So again, we have done that, and then we've looked into, well, how can we overcome that problem? We could do that is using different interfaces. We've worked with augmented reality. So, you know, augmented reality is something like, I'm using glasses like this, and I know that there is a position, and I know where I'm looking at, and I can refer to objects I could look at in my model, so to say. And then it gives me information about, do I have to turn right or left, where I am right now, in reality, so to say. I'm augmenting the reality. And we thought, well, that you can't go wrong, correct? You can't. It's impossible with augmented reality. For A to find B, I can't go wrong. It's impossible, basically. There's no cognitive. But exactly, what is the problem with this? The problem with augmented reality is again the same thing. And there's another serious problem with augmented reality, which is I never zoom out. I never zoom out. I'm always in the scenario. I'm always there in that reality. And the power of maps, really, from my perspective, is that I'm going on this meta abstraction level. Somebody has said that part is more important than others. That has been generalized, has been symbolized, has been told. It tells a story. I never come to that abstraction level. Like we do with language, when we talk about something, we stay in reality with augmented reality, always, so to say. We never zoom out. I'm not entitling me to understand the overall picture with that. So that was, for us, interesting to see as well. So, okay, we've tried to overcome that. We've worked with all kinds of different ways, and we think that even on small restricted devices, maps play a crucial role. It's hard to overcome them because of that power of abstraction. So we've done that, semantic descriptions, all kinds of descriptions, a location-based service which guides you to my office. I've tested that with school kids from a school next door, and they will use none of the routes we can engineer. Not one of those. We've done semantic descriptions, we've done all kinds of things. None of the routes which we engineered, they will use. And you know why? because they are afraid of some segments of the route. So what we really found out about that, there is a clear significant correlation between what I call our subjective relation to space, our response to space, and that task. And you can do that test yourself. If you think about it in your mental representation, close your eyes back home when you go to bed this evening or so. When you think about it and you have a map of the area where you live around you, are there areas where you feel more comfortable than others? Safe or unsafe, which you think they are attractive at one point of the day or not, those type of things. We all have what I call an emotional layer in our mental map. We all have that, okay? We all have that. And the idea is here, how does that influence us and for instance, in wayfinding? And I'll tell you what, if I'm coming to a city I've never been before, and I show on Google Maps, I'm looking into a map. I'm here in my hotel, and I have a meeting there. It's dark at night. It's late at night. The shortest route is this one, but that route goes through a dark. Nobody's walking there. Dark area. I don't know. And there is a street with bright, a lot of shops, a lot of people. It's a 20-minute detour. I will do it. And there's nothing to do with geometry, with all our LBS engineering. It has to do with my subjective relation to space, with my emotions. Correct? So we looked into that and we said, well, we've done what we call emotional cartography, emotional mapping. We looked into that and try to find out about that. There are several ways how you could do that. There are people which try to measure level of arousal as an indicator of how we are, if that is an indicator for emotional responses, so to say. I'm not convinced of that. The idea would be that I'm skin deductant or heart rate goes up. I'm coming to a intersection where I feel afraid, my heart rate will go up, okay? It's an intersection, a road, and there's a lot of traffic, so my heart rate will go up. Those type of things. But I might go through a very nice area. I walk along the Charles River, sunny day, beautiful. I'm relaxed. My wife calls me and says she's going to be divorced. My heart rate will go up. It has no relation to space at all from that perspective. So I'm really critical about that. There are projects which try to do that, to measure that and make a correlation to space. I'm critical about that. I'm not sure if that will really work out. Maybe as a cross-check, so to say. What we've done is we've done what we call self-reporting. The idea is like Facebook. You are at a particular place, you say, I like it or I dislike it. That's it, easy, okay? I'm here now, I like it or I dislike it, okay? And then we've worked with psychology departments and so on. They say, well, environmental psychologists would say, people judge the environment based on particular indicators, safeness, attractiveness, those type of things. So yes, you can say, well, it's not only I like it or dislike it, you can go into more details, differentiation, and tell us stories about that. And that gives a rich database. And that then informs, okay, if I know that data, and I can build now navigation services which take that into consideration, we might be able to find a route guiding instruction which considers this and is as human-like as possible. And so we can build that school kit human routing service, so to say, which confirms what they are doing. And yes, finally, we've been successful in doing that. But now comes a side effect of that. We didn't thought about that. The urban planning department of my home city, Vienna, became interested in that. They say, wow, that's interesting. Friday night at that particular place, because it's time and space, Friday night people say, particular profile, young generation people say, oh, that place, I like that place. That's a nice place, okay? Sunday morning, people say, oh, we don't like that place. So we see in time and space a judgment of us, citizens, about our environment, so to say. We get an emotional response. And so they say, well, that's interesting to see how all of us perceive actually the environment we are in. And that can be visualized and shown through mapping and through cartography. So that is something which we have tried to do, and we are working with the planning department now a little bit, and we want to go further with this. So now other cities we have done what we call a mapping party in Italian cities. A city in Italy, 2 cities in Italy have taken that on board, and they rolled that out, and they said on a weekend, they rolled it out in the television and the newspaper. They say, well, let's make a mapping party. All of us judge our city, so to say, so that we get that kind of subjective emotional layer. How do all of us perceive the city? Which places do we like, which we don't like, those type of things. So that was part of that. You can cross-check that with, as I said, with measurements. You can cross-check that with social media data. So if people making photographs and they're writing a text to that photograph, you can make what we call a sentiment analysis. You can say something about that is a positive sentiment or a negative one. And that type of data can give that picture, so to say. And I consider that as also an element of modern cartography. And we have that, it's kind of a layer of the OpenStreetMap, which we've built on top of that. I'm also involved in something which is called an international master program. We have started 5 or 6 years ago, universities in Germany, in Munich and in Vienna and in Dresden. We've started an international master program, English only, on cartography. We've looked into how many master programs are there. We found thousands of geo-information science, geo-information systems, geoinformatics, geomatics, those type of terms. A lot of them are available. We found non-international master program globally, which is called cartography. So on purpose we did that. And now that has become so successful. We get so many applicants every year that we are really selective. We can only take 20 of those. That the European Union have decided they have a program which is called an excellence program. So they give 5 master programs a year, a label and a lot of money, so to say. And they've done it with cartography. And the reason for that was they say, well, here we are. We have more and more data. We are not short of data, and we will not be short of data. That was a problem of the past. We are not short of data anymore. And we are not short of technology. We are not short of technology to model, to analyze, to capture data and those type of things. We are not short of that. It's the opposite. But we are short of making use of that, to making sense of all of that. We need that element more and more, that somebody is there which can make use of that. There's this big data thing. What is the relevant part of it? How is it correlated and linked? And how can I transmit that to a human? Because if it's not a human, if it's computer to computer, forget about cartography. But if there is a human involved, decision maker, a tourist, my neighbor, we need those interfaces. And they think, well, here we are. That's what cartographies actually do with spatial information. So they say, well, here's the money, and here's that label. So for the next 5 years, we have that kind of excellence program. And we've got a lot of American actually applicants as well. So I want just to mention that. If you have bright students, we are looking into those, so to say. So let me come to a very big picture of my thinking here. So where are we with cartography, so to say? And as I said before, what I think where we are is we are getting smaller and smaller with sensors. We are not short of that. Data capturing, data acquisition elements. There are sensors on small beds flying around, producing data. And while we are sitting here, there are tons and tons of data being produced. There are, in that city here, there are sensors which measure the Charles River, they measure the traffic. Everything is measured permanently while we are doing that. Our mobile phones are measuring. So we are not short of sensors because they're getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And they are embedded in our daily life. People are not forced to produce data. They do it themselves, correct? We see that. We are all measuring ourselves in a way, somehow as well. It's unbelievable how that is done. And we could argue, I mean, really, everything happens somewhere. There's always a space component to it. It's always spatial data, in a way. Everything happens somewhere. So, of course, that is something which we are interested in. And I think what we see from that is that from that getting small, we are really getting big. We have that, of course, that big data thing. And again, okay, here we are. Is everything there? For a computer, that's fine. That's what we need. My grandmother, The information is there. We meet there for a coffee. It's there. My grandmother will not be able to deal with that. So we need to have an interface to us humans. And I'm arguing we need that. We need a map. We need maps to do that, basically. That's my argument, my key argument why cartography is so relevant, actually. Because in that realm, in that area we are working in with sensors and data, how do we make that work for us humans, so to say? We need to do that, so to say. And so we have that overall overarching visions everywhere in governments, in science, in research, and so on, that we have that vision. Information is available anytime, anywhere. Ticked off is already there, correct? We have that. We have that. But now I think there it becomes interesting and more interesting for us, where I think we will have to be contributing heavily. That is what I mentioned before with that. Is that information tailored to my context and my need? And this is not ticked off yet. As I said before, if I'm in a hurry and I'm speaking to my small boy, I will say differently than do Wendy, because I don't know her and we have a different kind of relationship. That is obviously something which we do as humans in communication. And we need to do that with our human interfaces as well, with maps as well, so to say. I'll give you one example. If I'm driving a car with 100, I don't know how many miles per hour you are allowed to drive in the US. 100? Is it? No.
65.
Oh, that's far. So let's say I'm driving a car with 65 miles per hour, okay? It's a very complex highway system. And I need to know, do I have to turn right or I have to go straight ahead? Okay? The context I'm in, a complex map would be nonsense. In that context, a complex map would be nonsense. It would be just nice to have an arrow saying, well, turn right, or a voice. So the context should determine how we communicate. And it should be considered in determining how we communicate. That is meant by this. So we need to know that better, that user needs, demands, and context. That vision is not ticked off, so to say. We know that in many cases, we see that the big industry, the big industry, I know from the German car industry, they're very much doing user-centered design. So they're permanently iterating all their developments by doing that user-centered. And that is something which we need to include in our work as well, from my perspective. I think that in some sense that we're getting there, that location obviously is a key. So like everything happens somewhere. So obviously that plays always a role. Where I am has always a role in what we are doing. And we can see that it is deployed in all kind of information systems. And we're having a clear contribution there. I think it's a clear aim and a vision for all of us, so to say. And we can see already that those services are widespread and of daily use in a way. I mean, it's really a mass market already. And so we've come into a very prominent position with our, I call that geo domains, geo industries domains, so to say, in our geo research, and cartography as a prominent part of that. And I'm also arguing that in one sense, we will see that people will feel kind of spatially blind without that. There are not many people referring to topographic maps anymore, so to say. People don't know that. They don't know. The most people are referring to their mobile devices only. And what I said before is, as we've done that experiment, that group has a significant less ability to act in space, plan in space, think space, based on their mental representation. I call that spatially blindness in a way. We're getting there, so to say. How can we overcome that? That's a key question to me. How can we do that? That we're getting there, so to say. And I really think that those type of services will be enable persons, but on one hand also that they are collecting data. They're putting something in. They see something, what is around them. They will get supported, and that will have an impact on how we work, we live, how we interact. We can see that already. If I'm walking through the campus here at Harvard or at MIT, I see that already. How people are doing that differently. So how do we get to that vision? How do we overcome that? What shall we do? What are our strategies? Well, as I said, technologies, it's not in our hands sometimes. The technologies which are developed are sometimes from the big industry. It's not in the hand of cartographers. What comes across? Google classes, well, it come across and we will eventually use it, so to say. We see that this big data thing, well, yeah, again, but what we could do is we could look into how can we make that useful? It's really about that user-centered element of it. If I'm talking about communication, I can, well, you know what, if I'm speaking German now, I'm doing everything right. I say the same thing, I do everything right. But if you're not able to understand German, my responsibility is, well, I've done it, I've said it, I've sent it, okay? But you will not get something out of it. So that communication means the responsibility ends with, have you made something out of it, so to say? Is it possible for you to make a meaning out of it? That is the responsibility. And the responsibility of a map maker is exactly this one. So cartographers in the past sometimes forgot about that. And we still do that. We see that in the GIS industry very much. So in the GIS industry, people learn to know about their Esri product. They learn which buttons to push. They are able to produce a map. My responsibility is ended. That's my task. I can produce a map. If that map is useful for the decision maker, for the government, for the agency he's producing that map for, I don't know. It's not my responsibility. That is not my understanding of cartography. So we have to start with the user, his demand, his need. And a map is like an answer to that. To entitle that person to do something with it, so to say. So I'm really thinking that user-centered element is key for cartography. How can we do that? Well, context awareness is one of those things. We need to be able to model that. We need to model the user better, the use cases. That's why I'm so interested in that functions of maps. We have to have adaptive algorithms. That means that a map can be adapted. As I said before, I'm saying to my young son, well, I feel like I need a coffee. I'm adapting the same type of information database is transmitted, but adapted differently than I would say to Wendy. The same thing, same information, but adapted in a different way, so to say. We need to do the same thing with maps. So we need those type of algorithms. And we need to consider that cartography is really the key language in that respect. It's so relevant in that area that we do that really as a way to communicate, to get that messages across, so to say. How we do that, how maps are produced, obviously are really becoming different. That has changed. There is the change, so to say. We do it automatically, formally described. We consider a map nowadays, and that is really a change of paradigms. For a cartographer, that hurts. In the past, a map can be seen as a product. It's a product, a tangible product in a way, okay? But now when we are honest, Google Maps and the location-based service map, that is not a product. The map itself, I look at it for 2 seconds. It's produced on the fly as a result of a query. It's a service, actually. So a map actually is not a product anymore in that modern world of cartography. It's a service. This is a change of thinking, a change of paradigms here as well. And it's hard to deal with that as cartographers, so to say. And then I would say maps becoming more and more real time. While we are talking about something, the map is being produced based on data which we are including in this and so on. It becomes ubiquitous. So we have different attributes to those type of things. And the attributes of modern maps are that they are as real time as possible from time to time, become ubiquitous, that they have to be media adequate. We see so many maps which are ugly, which are not fine, because I've used a 2-dimensional map which has been produced for 2D, and it works fine. And I put it as texture on a 3D model. That makes no sense. It is not meant for that. So I'm using that and augment that on augmented reality thing. That makes no sense. It's not media adequate. So those type of things is something which we need to consider. I consider a modern map attribute as being personalized, as I said before, as a way of communicating. So we need to do that. But there's one thing which has not changed and will never change, which is a map should be well designed. And what I mean by that is that a map should first of all be perceivable. There's no graphic conflict. That would be something like, I'm not talking too loud or less, so that you can hear me, basically, comfortable way. The same is true with visual communication. We see so many maps which have a lot of conflicts. We see those maps where there are 3 million pins on top of each other. What's the point of that? What's the point of producing a map in the 21st century, having 3 million pins on top of each other as an overlay to a base map like Google Maps or whatever? Now, what's the point of that? Would you ever buy a newspaper which has all articles being put it on top of each other? Why would you do that? Why would I be producing maps like this? That's nonsense. A map must be perceivable. It must tell a story. It must be able to do that. So it must be well designed. That is a key element to my perspective. We've lost that in many ways. That's part of that this technology-driven developments of cartography, that yes, we can handle the data and the geometry and so on and so on and so on. And yes, the user can, he can zoom in and then he will find that. But no, every pixel which is on a screen, on a display, must have a meaning. That is the responsibility of cartography. It must have a meaning. And if you look at maps which have been produced in the past, the wonderful maps which have been produced in the past, every single sign, symbol, stroke, whatever they've used had a meaning. So we have to come back to that in a sense. And in interactive cartography, that becomes really tricky because you allow the user to do things. It becomes even more tricky because you have to deal with that. What are the limitations, so to say, for the user to deal with that as well? So there's this concept, what we call engineered serendipity. Have you heard about serendipity? So serendipity that, well, I haven't thought about that it could be like this, but I thought it was luck that I got into that. It was just luck that I got into that, so to say. I strolled around the city and just by luck, I ended up in that place, which I liked. That's the term serendipity, so to say. But I think with systems like that and with cartography, it's kind of an engineered serendipity which we need. So we have to give the user the feeling he's controlling what he's doing, and he's getting into things in a serendipitous way. But actually, we've engineered it in a way that he's not doing completely, off the track things, which would make no sense at all, so to say. So this is a way of thinking in modern cartography to have that type of concept, which is part of that. The question is, if we're doing all those modern maps, what for? What for? What's the point? I'll give you one example. When engineers are doing things, the first mobile phones we've worked with in location-based services was a phone from a German company called Siemens at that time. They produced mobile phones then. That was an excellent piece of engineering work, 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago. It was a piece of work with a lot of functions, and it had 32 hard buttons and soft buttons to operate it. Everything was in there, was possible, okay? And the engineers want to make sure that I'm entitled to use all of those functions. It was impossible to use. I always forget about what is the mode of operandum, so to say. Now I'm looking on an iPhone, it could be a Samsung or whatever as well. It has one button only. One button. Same piece, same thing. Same functions. One button. The interface is different. The interface to the human is different. This is key. I think this is the key element here. We need to do that. So what for? Why are we doing that? Is key. So what Apple is doing very well in the mobile phone industry is what I call user-centered design, user-centered engineering. They're looking into, well, how pragmatic sense, how are they really doing, those people? What are they up for to support that? So we need to understand that really better. What is a map for? To solve a problem, to tell a story, to confirm an opinion, to support a decision maker, to make aware. What is it for? Is the key first question we need to answer, so to say, or to look into. And it's not because sometimes I have the feeling that maps are produced because, well, I have data, I have a lot of data, so I throw it on somebody and say, well, make me a map out of that. There's some spatial relation here. Show me. Okay? No. What will that help? If it's just determined by because I have data, I do something. What's the point? Which answer will that give? To what? If I haven't started with the question, so to say, with the need and demand. Or and very often we see that, and as I've been president of the International Cartographic Association, I've traveled the world about cartography. So I went to places Have you ever heard about Tonga? The Kingdom of Tonga in the Pacific Ocean is an independent country. And in Tonga, the government of Tonga said, well, we need cartography. So we've bought Esri licenses. We have ArcGIS. We have it. We have it. Now we want to do maps. I said, what for? What's the point? What do you want to do with it? So they say, yeah, well, we have invested, so we need to. It will lead to nothing, basically, in a way. So I really think, and that's why I'm highlighting this point so dramatically, so to say. I really think that it is key. Like in human communication, if I'm just telling something without ignoring what my counterpart is thinking or feeling or signaling already, just, that's not what we should do, so to say. So I really think that there's this important role of cartography is about communication. It's efficient communication of spatial information. And communication in that sense in cartography means important. It means the keyword of abstraction. I really think the power of abstraction is the miracle of maps. It's about design. I always call that to our students, I always say we need a triangle of competencies and skills as a cartographer. And design is one of those cornerstones. You need to deal with data. You have to be a data cruncher. Yes, you have to. You have to deal with technology. You need to deal with computers, of course. But you need to be a designer as well. You need to be a designer as well. It's not enough to be a nerd in computer science. You need to be a designer as well. Okay? I really think that's important because it has something to do with cognition, with perception, and so on. But of course, data handling is important. Geoscience, technology is important. We need to do with the internet, with LBS, service-oriented cartography, those type of things. And we can see a lot of examples of that. Real-time cartography, data which is acquired right now, captured right now, being put into the map and used there. We know that crowdsourcing plays a prominent role and has changed the way we looked into data, so to say. We know that LBS is really something which is mass market in the meantime. We know that 3D models play a prominent role, and call it 4D modeling where time plays a role as well. But also it was interesting to see, we've done some experiments on 3D modeling, and we know there are so many cities which invest into 3D models. They want to have their city being modeled in 3D. And they have that photorealistic textures on top of that 3D model. In my city, and in a lot of cities in Germany, in Austria, and places where I have contacts to, a lot of money has been put into that. There's no use for it, to be honest. There's no real use for that. It's interesting. They thought, well, we built that photorealistic city. What people do is they look into that photorealistic model and they try to find that one little piece which has already changed and those type of things. That is what people like to do. But then what's the point? Now what we've done is we've built textures to 3D models which are abstracted. We made the texture not photorealistic, a photo, but we made like a cartoon of that building. Cartoon-like, yeah, like you would see in a cartoon. An abstraction, a symbolized abstraction. And we put that on top of the 3D model. Wow. All of a sudden, they say, well, that's what we need. Somebody has done work to generalize it, to show me what is more important than others, and what are places which are different, those type of things, what maps are usually doing. And so there is another interesting element where we can see that that plays a role, that we're looking into that from a modern cartography perspective as well. Of course, geomedia techniques like connecting social media with augmented reality can be a role for cartography as well. And you know, Geo Data Infrastructures, is that a keyword you are familiar with? Geo Data Infrastructures is a big thing in every country in the world, basically to say, well, my country, Austria, is a small country. If I'm building a railway, we are very, it will not last long and we will come to a border because it's a small country. So let's consider I'm building a railway and I come to a border. It's very close that the border will come. And now the other country has built a railway as well. And now we are coming to the border and we see, oh, it has used different widths, a different infrastructure detail. The railway has different width, so to say. It doesn't fit together here. That is something that what we call a problem of infrastructure. When we have a highway from Canada to the US, maybe, I don't know, there's something, you need to change something there also. Those type of things. In geodata, it's the same thing, okay? In my computer, I'm producing data. I have a particular format, I have a particular meta description, and your data has other ones. So how do we fit that together? We need to overcome that then, and so on and so on. So Geo Data Infrastructure means let's build a system which allows that I can use your data, you can use my data. Also, I'm speaking German, you speaking English, he's speaking French. We find a meta way to do that. How do we do that? We use technical standards. That's OGC standards nowadays. And we need to solve the problem of policy making. So does it cost me something? Will you allow me? How much does it cost? What is the liability? Those type of things. That's spatial data infrastructure. Europe puts a lot of money into this. It's called Inspire, that program. So all European countries are rolling that out. What happens now? There are enormous amount of data, as I said before. And we can link them now because we have an infrastructure. If I'm building a new highway, what will happen? We know from the traffic scientists, if I build a new street, there will be more traffic. It's not that the existing traffic will use that new street and the other streets will get less traffic. No, there will be more traffic. A new lane on a highway will trigger more traffic. We know that from traffic scientists. So it's easy to understand if I'm doing that all our data are linked, Geo Data Infrastructure will lead to more traffic. More and more data will be connected and correlated. How will I use that? I will need maps. I will need a lot of maps. So I think we are in a very good situation currently in cartography because there's a big, big demand and need for viewers, geodata, visualization, those type of things. And we can see from our students, they all get into the market quickly because there's such a big demand and need for those type of competences, so to say. And you know, from the smart city idea, same thing. I mean, what is a smart city currently other than, well, people say, well, we have all those new technologies, let's dump it, drop it on a city, let's see what happens. Come on, what is the point of this? A smart city must be that there are smart citizens. I mean, there are citizens, there are users, there are humans. What's the point for them? So again, if there is a human involved, that interface between data technology plays a role. And that interface in terms of spatial information, again, is key in terms of cartography. And that's why I think it's relevant. So I'm sorry about being so enthusiastic about my domain and my discipline. Because I was the president of the International Cartographic Association, we worked quite a bit with meta organizations. We worked quite a bit with the United Nations as well. The United Nations, as you know, have a lot of entities. Some of those are known to all of us, like, I don't know, about if there is a crisis in the world, the security question, states come together, the leaders of the states, and decide something. Some are related to economy, some are related to other elements. So the United Nations have decided to found a new entity on a very, very, very high level, which is called the Global Geospatial Information Management, GGIM. The United Nations have founded this entity, Global Geospatial Information Management. Why have they done that? It was top down, it was not bottom up, that the geo persons came and said, well, they said, well, you know what? It's actually in our interest of all member states of the world, of the globe, that our Earth is a sustainable planet. That's our main goal. Okay. How can we do that? How can we support it? How can we make better decisions? Well, it seems like the planet is a spatial thing. So spatial information plays a role. Does spatial information play a role just by modeling, transferring them, capturing them? Or do we have to make informed decisions as well? Then maps play a role as well. So that was really a surprisingly action for all of us. And through the International Cartographic Association, I was involved in that process. I think now 4 years or so, that UNGGM entities, they are meeting regularly. They're doing all kind of actions in that respect. And the overall idea is that, yes, we want to have a sustainable future of our planet because it sounds pathetic, but I think it's really true. Everything happens somewhere. We would agree. And in a way, location is key, obviously. How do I know about space, about place, about location? Well, we can know about technologies. We have data, Computers can figure that out. But how can we really unleash that potential of spatial information? Unleash it for us. How can we make sure that that spatial data is really applicable for the government, for a decision maker, for my neighbor, for me, without becoming a computer scientist or a statistical analysis expert or whatever? How can I do it in a way that I support this person? How can I do that? So how can we not only quantify us, but qualify us, enable us to contribute to having a sustainable planet? My argument as cartographer is maps are key in that respect. Maps have a key role in that respect. And that message was so important that the United Nations have actually endorsed us as the International Cartographic Association to run an international map year, which we are in the last months, so to say, 2016. It's a UN-endorsed international year, which highlights that function of map component for reaching that overall, that overarching aim, so to say. And finally, my last slide would be, if you need a reason to find me in Vienna, to have a coffee with me, and you need a reason for that, I'm organizing a conference on location-based services, fascinating papers, November, 1 month from now. Find me in my office and we will have a coffee. Thank you very much. So I'm not sure about the time, but if there are any questions, then of course.
Anybody needs to leave, make way out, but let's have some questions.
Thank you for really a thought-provoking talk. It got me thinking a lot about the ethical issues associated with, let's say, personalized cartography,
Yes.
right? Driven by some entity making a million, let's say, very smart decisions based on big data, perhaps, based on past behavior of similar people, based on whatever, right?
Yes.
It strikes me that there's a very, very big difference between that kind of customized, personalized cartography as developed and promoted and pushed by a private entity like a Google or Yahoo or an Apple,
Yes.
and a government entity.
Yeah.
A huge difference.
Yeah.
Right? Because one is it's highly political. If it's done by a company, there's a profit motive, it's clear, and it's a black box. You can't know what they're doing because that's their secret sauce. But in a government situation, any decision which is going to guide a person to a particular place or away from a particular place is political.
Yes.
Has political implications, impacts, who's gaining, who's losing traffic, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I think
Yes.
I would just like
I fully agree. But I mean, I fully agree with the statement that every map is a political statement at the end. Of course, it has to. It is. And in that sense, we have a high responsibility for how we do it. And there comes this ethical question along with this. And I think with this personalization, we are on a very tricky grounds. But we are using, I think what we see is that we are adapting methods from other areas into this area as well. Because when you choose your next hotel, you might go on a website and it says, well, it will be personalized. It will give ratings. It will give a recommendation system. It will be personalized in a way due to your profile and interests and so on. So you have the same thing there in a way that it is somehow determining what you might be exposed to and finally what type of decision you are doing.
But I know it's biased. I know there's a good chance that it's biased toward the company that's providing. That's clear and that's okay. So that's a form of transparency. But if I guess what I'm wondering is, let's say a beautifully made, very truthful or whatever, useful map is created by a government agency to help with the tourism in their city or whatever. Is part of cartography that letting the viewer of the map know what decisions went into deciding which were the right places to go and wrong places to go in that city. Do we have an opportunity because of technology
Yes.
to give the user the control panel to see behind the scenes how that data was synthesized?
Yes, that is a very good idea in a way. I think what we see is that I call it the pragmatic dimension of cartography, so to say. The pragmatic dimension means that what I see on a map is always a selection. It's always a generalization aspect, and so on and so on. So somebody has made a decision based on whatever. He has made a decision, and that is doing something with me, correct? So I call that relation the pragmatic dimension of maps, so to say. In order to entitle me to understand that pragmatic dimension, that I'm determined or not, that is useful. But interestingly enough, most cartographers say, well, people don't care. They don't want to know. They're not interested in that.
Some might not want to know.
But that would be interesting to follow that up.
But a watchdog group might want to know.
You have to answer this question first, though, which is the map just a visualization? Or is the map data? The map is data about the world, but the map is data about how somebody sees the world. So it's sort of, the map is what the map is.
Yeah, I'm just saying it matters who's providing the so-called smart service.
Yeah.
It matters a lot. If it's a company, it's a black box, and you know it's driving business in a certain direction. But if it's a government entity, how do they decide? Oh, don't go to that neighborhood.
Well, so governments are still critical. And, so what you were mentioning, UNGGIM, the other side of the question is, what the hell took them so long? UAG has been around for decades.
Yes.
And, but there was always a high-level decision that having infrastructure, having a UN map was too political to do until something changed.
Within the United Nations realm, they have always these what they call regional cartographic conferences, and they have entities which deal, for instance, with the question of toponymy, the names. That's a UN thing since decades, so to say. But still, with just this August, we had a UNGGM meeting in New York again, the UN headquarters, and the United Nations have these sustainability goals. I'm not sure if you're aware of all those sustainability goals. And so they have asked us, the ICA, to produce maps which demonstrate, highlight that, how we can help to overcome them. So the biggest problem with that was that if the map highlights a particular border in a particular way or not. It was not the overall message, so to say, which was important. But the Indian guy and the Chinese guy, they looked at those maps only in terms of how have you depicted that border in Kashmir. That is what they are interested in. So yes, of course. I mean, and I agree. I mean, the map itself is always a statement, a political statement, and has its own kind of data set, so to say, with this.
But those are conflicting perspectives. So being GIS centric, we think of the map as a visualization of data, which is separate from the data. But you know the story about the map of the Arctic Wildlife Refuge, and the actual borders of that were on one map, which was kept in some office. And during the Bush administration, when there was a lawsuit about what was the boundary of the wildlife refuge, that map disappeared.
Oh, really?
And there was no underlying data. The map was the data. And so there, I'm interested in your perspective on that. The map as original data. Of course, we're here with this Harvard Map Library with 1,000 years of maps. That's all we have is the map as the data.
Yes. Well, I agree with that. I mean, I would argue that again, I would make this, that the metaphor of human communication is very similar to me. The sentence I'm building, if I'm using words, there's a lot of things which are in my mind, in my emotions, in my feelings, in my thoughts, in whatever, which I'm not putting into a word. So every sentence I'm saying is a selection, it's a symbolization, it's a code which I'm putting together, and it's a statement by this. I'm saying something. There's something which I'm not saying, and there's always a statement. It's always political in a way. Huh? You can say, and a map is the same story, of course. Yeah, always in a way. But I agree with you that with new technologies we could have a feedback loop, because if I'm saying something, still every sentence is doing that, every human communication. But you could still come and say, well, what? You can ask, so to say. Huh? There can be a loop, and that is true with new technologies and maps. I think that there can be a loop back, so to say, and trying to find out. I want to know better, and what was the reason why that was depicted and that is left out, so to say. So give me explanations to that. So that is true. I think that is a key element. Yeah. Yes.
So I'm an urban planner by training, and before I became a GIS person, in a school we did cartography. That's what they taught us. But these days in planning the school, they teach graphic design.
Okay.
And so they're very graphically oriented. So what happens? So I sort of want to see the role, because there are a lot of graphic designers these days that they make maps.
Yes.
So when we make a lot of maps in an office, then it goes to, some of them they go to art graphic design too. So it's not really cartography. And I want to know, what is this relationship? So how do you see graphic designers who design maps?
Yes. Well, I would say that especially with infographics in journalism, data journalism, that has become a big thing. Huh? There's a lot of people which work with, well, are able to express themselves in a graphic language, have a lot of creativity and skills and competences, and have learned to deal with map making as part of that, because map making has become on your fingertips, so to say. In the past, it was really restricted by technology to be a map maker, but now all you need is your MacBook, and that's fine, and you can do it. And that is an obvious, I would say that's an obvious development. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's not a threat from my perspective. I really think what we see is a backlash, that cartography as a discipline, as a domain, has been somehow being very passive, has been gone away from the area very much, because they have to stick to this kind of well, we know how to do maps, and all the others shouldn't, or so. That was somehow a part of that problem. But I would argue that when we're working, for instance, with in our country, it's called press agency, Austrian press agency, they're doing a lot of brilliant infographics, but they lack also this, I had mentioned about this triangle, they lack those other elements of the triangle then very much. So they are not that into data crunching and into that modeling element. So I really think a modern cartography contributes something on a very unique way, because he has all those competencies and skills combined, and could use spatial data in a way, could use graphical skills in a way, could use that with new technologies, and know about the methods of cartography. Because when you're looking at maps nowadays, we just had, beginning this year, we had this, maybe some of you have heard about that, it was called the Cartographic Summit. So from ICA, we've done with Jack Dangermond, with Esri, we've done we call it Cartographic Summit. So for 3 days we have been in Redlands, and we've invited a lot of out-of-the-box thinkers from other disciplines to look into where will cartography head to. And it was clearly visible there that the methods which ArcGIS is giving you and all the GIS programs are restricted. Because when you're looking at maps in the library, you will find maps with a lot of methods which have been used to show something. And many of these methods have been disappearing because it's hard for a computer to do them, so to say. So we've actually gone to a much more simpler language. We find all those correlate maps nowadays. That's it, basically. And now, so the infographic people, they overcome that problem because they are becoming very creative in graphic language, and we have to marry that again, so to say. And I think that is the role for modern cartography. So I suggest to your school, you should have a cartography class there, and you should do something on that. That would be good.
Yeah, I guess to kind of riff off your question or your comment a little bit there. So I'm a cartographer. And,
oh, good.
I work at MIT in the Department of Urban Studies and Planning.
Good.
I teach a cartography course there. I would say, I guess a side point, but I guess I would say a graphic designer that is making a map could be considered a cartographer. They just might not really know it. And that kind of would lead to kind of like one of my next kind of questions, I guess, for your kind of get your thoughts on is, in my experience in the field, cartography, at least the modern cartographers, cartography as a discipline seems to have like a little bit of a publicity problem in a way. And that I talked to when I first met my now wife, when I explained that I was a cartographer, she was like, "So you're like Christopher Columbus?" And I was like, "No, I actually spend most of my time in in an office." Yes. But that said, I think that requires some introspection, as like kind of that kind of has taught me to like kind of why would people say that, or why is that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah.
Why is that a thing, and like how can cartography as a discipline kind of look at that critically?
Yes, I know exactly what you mean by this, and my answer to that is the semantics of a term. How is that defined? Mm-hmm. I think it's defined by those which do something. Okay, so I was always very conservative in a sense with using the term which describes what I am doing. Okay, so we have seen in the past that many cartographers run into that problem that they had to explain to their wife or to their uncle or to whoever, or at their university to the department next door what I'm doing, and you say, well, I'm a cartographer, then they would say, well, what does that mean? Are you Christopher Columbus? Yes. So, and now here becomes a decision, and then the people change their term, the name, just to overcome that problem and call themselves differently. You see all those different names, geomatics, whatever has come up. And just stick to it. Do modern cartography and stick to the name. That's the first thing you can do. Okay?
Yes, and
I think that's the most successful strategy you can do. You stick to the name, and what you do determines the semantics of that name, then, of that term as well. And what we can see now, and based on the ICA experience, I can tell you that we have that problem. We have seen that problem for many, many years, and in some countries it is just arriving, and in some countries it's already disappearing again. And we see that in Europe, especially in Europe, I would say, cartography is really cool. It's really cool. It is seen as so modern. The term has a new semantics now because people say, wow. When you're looking at, and I'm always showing those indicators on that question, when you're looking at APIs, application programming interface of web services. So which APIs are the most popular ones? Out of the top 10 list of APIs, I think there are 5 or 6 which deal with maps. Mm-hmm. And they're not people forced to use them. Those are the kids. They go home and play around with maps. They want to do it. I mean, come on, it's cool. They like it. It's fun. Maps are entertaining. People have usually a very emotional response to maps. People like maps. So it's actually really cool to be a cartographer. It's cool. So we just have to stick to the name, first of all. Yeah? Give them a new meaning. And then people like you and me and others which consider themselves cartographers should wave the flag and say, wow, here we are. We have this really cool discipline doing cool stuff, is most relevant and modern, and is contributing to save our planet at the end of the day. I mean, this is, I'm of course superimposing it a little bit, but that is kind of the way of thinking I'm personally having. I always stick to that. And I as I said, in some countries, I've seen that we are already in a very strong curve into that again. that our international master, for instance, on purpose, we called it cartography. And now people say, no, I don't want to do a geomatics master. I want to do cartography because I want to have that graphical skills completed with that and so on and so on. So there are a lot of indicators which go into that direction. So I would like to suggest to you, stick to the term cartographer. Wave the flag of cartography at MIT.
Yes. We will never give up the cartography ship. Unfortunately, we ran out of time for the room, so we'll have to adjourn. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
I got dragged out on a technical question, but I was able to watch some of it from the live stream.
Okay, I'm
going to turn it off. Yeah,
and the live stream will be put on the website.
Yeah, I'm turning it off right now.